Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We couldn't do these without the incredible support of our sponsors, and we want to take a moment to say thank you to all of them. First, thanks to our diamond sponsor, Varsity Brands, including BSN, Herff Jones, and Varsity Spirit. Varsity Brands, elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. We also want to say thank you to our great platinum sponsors, including Gipper, sports graphics made incredibly simple. Ephesus Lighting, innovating a brighter future at every level. Vital Signs, bring student achievements to life. Camp Mobile, where leaders communicate better. And Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Thanks to all of our great sponsors. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is a good friend, Cheryl Van Paris. Cheryl is the Professional Development Manager for the NIAAA. She works specifically with certification, but she has been involved with the professional development program for a long time. Cheryl, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Jake. Good to be here.
I miss our regular meetings with certification since I just rolled off the committee, but got a nice text from Pete the other day. So good to see that those committee members are still working hard.
Miss you too.
Yeah. Well, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell them a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, and maybe how your love of athletics, led to this position with NIAAA.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the large town of North Manchester, Indiana. Graduated from Manchester High School and then went on to Purdue University, where I got my degree in recreational management and a true boiler. So that will always be my first real job that I would consider my first real job. I worked for at that time was the Indiana Convention Center in Hoosier Dome. And I started out as an intern and worked my way up. Then when I left, I was a sales representative and loved every minute of it.
Well, what brought you to your current position with NIAAA?
Kind of funny story. I worked with Patty Conrad in our office, who's basically our meeting planner for the conference. And Patty and I worked together some years ago, and we've always enjoyed working together. And we were looking to move back to Indianapolis, and I said, if anything ever becomes available, and the position at that time was the professional development manager, and it was going to be both certification and LTI. And I applied. I was one of many, and I was very fortunate to get the position. I've always had a love of sports, so this kind of tied everything together.
Well, I know your son also was, had quite a sports background too.
Yes, my son ran track in high school. He played basketball for a couple of years, and I encouraged him to run track just to stay in shape for basketball. And then he ended up being the better track athlete than the basketball player. So he ended up running at state when we lived in Ohio. And now he has, just so you know, he just did his second color commentary for the Columbus women's indoor soccer team. So, yeah, so he's had a love for sports also. He's a huge Columbus Crew fan.
It's great to hear. Always love to hear the background stories. Talking about that, in our world of athletic administration, we always talk about the importance of leadership and particularly mentoring. Right. So I'm curious, who are some of your mentors growing up? Maybe teachers or coaches, or maybe people that you've worked with or worked for. The expression I always like to use is, I still hear those voices in my head when I'm talking to a coach or maybe a student. So whose voice do you still hear?
It's kind of funny. I have to say it was my parents in the beginning. as being the middle child, the only daughter, and I wanted to do things with my dad and my older brother, my dad would hit fly balls in our front yard, and I put on a mitt and went out and caught fly balls in the front yard so I could be with my dad and my brother. And then when I became older, my dad was on school board and my mother had to watch the three of us while he was there. And since she really didn't care for what was on television on Monday nights, she got us to watch Monday Night Football. So kind of funny. So my mother was really the true, she really loved sports. My dad was like, okay with it, but she was like the true sports fan. And then I have to say, when I worked at the convention center, I loved my boss there. She was just always encouraging me, to do my best. And I'm still good friends with her to this day.
You've been involved with the NIAAA since I got involved. Now, I got kind of a late start as an AD. I was, a coach and an athletic director, but kind of in that order. And when I took a position back in 2008 as an athletic director, that was my first taste of our state association, and immediately got sucked into NIAAA. So I'm curious, how have you seen the organization from your perspective at the national office? How have you seen the organization, change and grow since you first started?
When I first started, everything was, done by hand. When you sent in a CAA, any of the applications for certification, they were all mailed in, or they could be faxed. And that was rather cumbersome. So then we kind of started with we'd scan them, send them to our readers, but they still came to me, by mail, giving people credit for courses, our LTI courses. It was all done by hand, every single one of them for every single class. So it was rather tedious. Things have gotten much better. Now we can upload, and it really cuts the time down on that. So, but that's what I've experienced in my 10 and a half years here.
Now, to our listeners, if you don't know, Cheryl is really the person. If you complete an LTI course at your state association, or if you submit your PDF for the Certified Athletic Administrator or your CMAA, that used to come across her desk. Now it comes through her computer. So she really is, kind of a touchstone person for certification and with LTI. So I'm curious, what do you think has been I won't pin you down to one, but what do you think has been one of the most significant additions to the Professional Development Academy, either, LTI course or certification? What are some things that you think have really stepped up what certification means for NIAAA?
Well, I think some of the states are now, and if it's the states or it could be your school district, they give maybe a stipend for becoming certified. I know there are some districts that require you being a registered athletic administrator to apply for the position, and then they expect you after a couple of years to get your certified athletic administrator. So I think that's helped. I think also taking our CAA online has really been a big boost for us. Last year during the pandemic, we couldn't have done really any kind of certification. I think we maybe had 60 people take an exam at a location. So that means we had 230 people take it online. And then the other was the CMAA, when we started doing the oral presentations. It's now, this year, we're about 50-50 with written and oral presentation. So I think those are the two biggest things that have really helped in the last few years.
Again, for our listeners, Cheryl works now specifically with our certification program, and it was really my pleasure and honor to work with her and the other members of certification for these many years. If you sent in a CMAA project, either the written project, which is still one of the options,
Mhm.
or if you presented an oral presentation. Cheryl, while not, reading it from cover to cover, she certainly was aware of projects coming
Mhm.
across. So
Yes.
without naming names, okay,
Okay.
what are a couple of projects that you have seen that, again, from your perspective, really would fall into that category of best practices, some really good projects? Can you share a couple with our listeners?
We had one in January. It was an incredible rebranding of his school. He, the AD, he was new, and he also was lucky. He had a principal who also felt the same way. They needed to have everything on the same page. Soccer team had this logo, and the football team used this logo, and he did an incredible job with his principal of rebranding, not just the athletic department, but rebranding his whole school, and it was outstanding.
Now, I know the answer to this, but I'm again going to ask you to share.
Okay.
For listeners that may be at that point where they've got their CAA, they're thinking about doing a project. Again, my recommendation is, hey, do something that you're already doing, that you have a passion for, and just tell the
Mhm.
story. But if they wanted to look at some CMAAs that have already been approved,
Mhm.
where would they go to look at these?
If you go to the NIAAA website, and you'll click on the home page, not on your profile. On the home page, click on the professional development tab, certification, and you'll scroll down to the bottom where it's certified master athletic administrator, and you'll click on learn more, and that'll take you to the next page where we have set up a Google Doc, which lists a number of the projects that have been approved in the last couple of years. And you can kind of get an idea of what was presented or written about. So I think that's helped. So if anybody has any questions, they can go there. And then if they have more, they can contact me. And then I can send them on to a certification committee member if they really want to get in depth.
I appreciate you sharing that. And again, reach out to your own state association and your own state
Yes.
coordinator for certification, and they should be able to give you those same directions. But
Right.
the NIAAA website has really stepped up the last few years, much more user-friendly, and a lot of resources there for athletic directors.
Right.
Cheryl, we're going to shift gears a little bit. One of the things
Okay.
we've done with the podcast since we started these is try to follow what's going on with COVID.
Okay.
And we're actually, to our listeners, we're recording this on March 8th. We're almost 1 year from when COVID, impacted everyone. So I know you're not an AD in a building, but
Correct.
from your perspective, what's going on right now in Indiana, maybe in Indianapolis, with regard to COVID? Not just return to school, but return to play. Can you share what's happening with the Indiana schools?
I believe we are in the I think it's regional time for boys basketball. Girls completed, I believe, at the end of February. Wrestling state is over, but we are having the big one coming up. Indianapolis is hosting the NCAA tournament, men's tournament, and that will be played strictly in Indianapolis. They have a number of sites that they're going to use, and I think they're allowing 20 to 25% capacity with fans. Families are encouraged to come, but they cannot contact their son. They're not allowing any interaction with the fans. They're trying to keep the teams isolated so they don't have that problem with COVID. So I can tell you in our office, when we first were able to come back, everything was masks in the building. We still do temperature checks every day in the office, but we are doing an incredible job in the state of Indiana. I have to give the state kudos. We are doing a great job vaccinating people. I'm going to give a shout out to Patty. Patty did the drive-through at the Indianapolis 500 to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. They set up, I believe it was Friday through Monday. They did drive-through and everybody just raved about how well it went. So I have to give our state, they've done a really, really good job with it once we've got the vaccine. And I had my first one. Second one will be on the 19th of March.
Well, that's good to hear. Glad everybody's safe there in the national office.
Yes.
Looking ahead,
Mhm.
has leadership been able to plan for those traditional July meetings or state coordinators in September? Has a decision been made yet? Are those going to be in person?
Right now, we are planning on in-person for July meetings and the state coordinators in September. Crossing our fingers, but yeah, it looks good.
Oh, well, definitely looking forward to that and connecting with everybody. Obviously we missed out on that this year for nationals. Couldn't get you down to
Yes.
Tampa, but again, hats off to you and the national staff for putting on a great virtual conference. What's the feedback been regarding the national conference this year?
Really, really good. I mean, and we're hoping that if everybody liked it virtually, because we had a lot of new first-time attendees. So we're hoping if they like the virtual, they're going to love the national conference, and we can finally do some networking, which was the one thing we weren't able to do as much of as that we, I know UADs love to do is a network, and that's the one thing we really couldn't do.
Well, the one thing that we talked about in our corner was that, you weren't there in person, but the ability through breakout rooms and the chat in the different platforms, I think from a volume standpoint, there were probably more network connections made
That's true. Yeah.
than you would normally. But again, everybody, we got to meet in person. Yeah,
Yes.
we got to get back to that in Denver. Okay?
Yep.
Another question that we always ask our ADs,
Okay.
what's your favorite part of the job? What gets you excited about coming into the office each day?
I have to say, this is the kind of the funny thing, because I'm the one who grades the exams and I send out the email notice saying congratulations, you passed the exam, blah, blah. And everybody, I have this, people say, thank you so much for everything you did for me. And I'm like, I really didn't do anything. You did all the work. You did the studying. You took the courses. You took the exams. I just graded it and sent you an email. So I always find that to be really funny, but that's probably part of the job that I love the most is, congratulating people on a job well done.
Well, you're certainly part of that journey. You're there at the very end to, grant them that official status that you're right, they have earned, but that would be cool. Okay.
That's the part I love.
What, if you were, and I know, Mike and Phil and all those people are probably going to see this, but, if you were in charge, let's say, what's something that you would add to the whole process of LTI certification? If you could wave that magic wand, what's something that you might streamline, eliminate, or add? What's your idea for a new best practice?
Wow. Well, that's a hard one. I really don't know. I mean, that's something I'd really have to think about because
it's all working so well.
Oh, I know.
Machine.
Eliminating all LTI manuals and going strictly digital with the manuals.
Is that something that's actually being discussed?
I don't know. If it's being discussed, I think we've had that discussion before, and I was all for it a couple of conferences ago. But we are doing, if you are doing, say, a virtual LTI course, you are going to get an e-manual. You're not going to get the hard copy. You're going to get an e-manual unless it's requested by your state.
Right. I'm going to branch off of that question. I know you have some involvement with some of the university affiliated programs.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious because I was working with one here recently. What's the percentage of those institutions using virtual manuals versus ordering hard copies? Can you share that number?
We're getting close to almost more virtual than hard copies. A number of them, I can only think of, there's still probably less than 5 that use the hard copies, but most are going towards the digital, since most universities are using digital books. So
Right. I mean, just myself, I have all my hard copies on my bookcase behind me.
oh God.
Uh, but if I get a question, I've found myself going more on my computer to the virtual one because I'm going to be sending that to the person that asked a question rather than say, oh, just go to page 62 in the manual. So yeah, I could see that shift coming. I'm sure there's some old dinosaurs like me that would, still want to keep the books, but virtual might be the way to go.
We'll see.
Cheryl, again, you and I get to see a lot of each other. Well, not as much as we used to because I'm not in certification anymore, but this has been great, connecting today, but we're not quite done.
Okay.
We always like to wrap these up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox.
Okay.
And again, to our listeners, Cheryl's not an AD, but she has a bird's eye view to some of the best practices for ADs over the past several years. So my question is this,
Okay.
you are sending out a brand new athletic director on
Mhm.
their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Cheryl Van Paris's athletic director toolbox?
Contact your state coordinator to find out how to start what you don't know. Find a mentor, maybe in your conference, who can help you with any questions. I have found this, that ADs are much more so than principals in sharing their best practices with each other. So maybe find somebody in your conference or somewhere where you can just go to them and say, hey, this is my problem. How can you help me figure this out? And third would be start the certification process. Start taking 501, 2, 3, just so you know what you don't know, because that's the big thing. So those would be my 3.
And you are 100% spot on about athletic directors, wanting to share. I can't speak for principals, but I know coaches, we always tended to keep things close to the vest. We didn't want to share, but ADs can't wait to share. So again, get in touch with your state association, find that individual, reach out, don't be shy,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then start that path on certification. Okay, great stuff.
I have to say that's the one thing about getting to observe the CMAA presentations. The certification committee are probably some of the best, I wouldn't say the best, they're the biggest stealers of other people's ideas, because they see all these presentations of what people are doing in their schools, and they're like, this is awesome. Boy, I could do this in my school. So you guys have a tendency to kind of pick from the really good projects that, like, hey, I could implement that. So that's something that it's kind of funny to watch, but it happens about every presentation.
Oh, again, you are absolutely right. Watching someone share something about their school that they're passionate about, that they
Mhm.
helped put together. It's like going to a workshop. You're just looking for that one nugget, and
Yeah.
watching those oral presentations. I think we were, scribbling down ideas as much as we were, grading the person. So
Right. Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Cheryl Van Paris, National Office Program
Mhm.
Management Director. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you very much, Jake. It's been fun. And it's good seeing you.
Well, we'll have to get you down here to Florida, on an official or unofficial visit.
Yeah.
To our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of these interviews are also being uploaded to the FIAAA Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. And until next time, thanks for listening. Come back again for another episode of the Educational AD.